Good God, this book was fantastic. Is Libre a psychic? This book was so confusing and it was amazing. Hello, my name is Andrew. Welcome to my channel. So today I am literally, it is 11:30 at night and I need to go to bed, but I can't go to bed until I have it in the internet. How obsessed I have become with this book series, and everybody says that the third book is just even better, and I have tortured myself to not continue the third book until I have made this video. So I just have to make this video so that I can continue. Like, it physically pains me to not be reading or listening to the third book in this series because it's so fucking good. So here I am. I'm here to gush a lot. I have a lot. I have so many positive. I'm here to gush. I'm here to inform you why it deserves just everything. All right, let's get into it. So if you haven't read The Diviners, the first book in the series, then I would definitely recommend you check out this video where I try to pitch you the series. So absolutely check it out. And then read The Diviners, and then read this book. And if you can, get the audiobooks. I was able to get them through my library. Highly recommend. This series made me cry. I don't remember if I cried in the first book, but I cried so much. I cried so much for the delicious, happy. I don't have words to describe how much this story made me feel. We're about to get into spoilers here, so don't let yourself get spoiled. Don't let yourself get spoiled. It would hurt me. It would hurt me so much if I took away any enjoyment for anybody for this book, okay? I'm getting into it now, okay? This whole review is gonna be all spoilers and everything that I absolutely adored about this book. And I have many notes that I took this time. We're gonna keep the video a little more concise this time, but let's just talk in general about the humor of this series because I adore it. I love it. I think it's amazing. I think Evie O'Neill is such an amazing protagonist, possibly my favorite protagonist. She's not quite as heavily present in this book, but she's still such a strong character, and every other character is still such a strong perspective. I just loved every character and I loved every perspective. I was interested in every perspective, but I absolutely adore Theta and Henry's friendship, and Theta and Memphis' story, and the Creole princess and poet, and it's so good. And just the scenes with Henry was, I've never been so emotionally affected. The humor is amazing. The characters are just so real to me. They're just everything that I could have ever wanted in a story. But let's get into it. So Evie, this whole story at the beginning, it starts off with Evie, and she has, from the first book, that she has informed everybody in the world, I guess, that she is a diviner, and she starts her own radio show. And there's just these commercials about soap, and they're just so funny, and I just appreciated it so much. This story has you laugh, it has you cry, it's just perfection. And then you have Henry meeting Ling in the dream state, and he's got that divine power where he can walk in dreams, and there's this whole conversation that he's having with Ling about the generational stuff with Ling and her family and everything that she feels like she owes them, and Henry's backstory with his dad and how he was banished from his own home. And there's an entire quote that I saved. This part that says if that's what being a man meant, then he wanted no part of it. It was, and Henry calling Louis Henri, just these characters having these pet names for each other and these nicknames. I'm getting chills talking about this book. I need to document it, how much I appreciate this story. Okay, just gush with me. Let's do it. Ready? Are you ready? Let's just... They're just so divine. They're just so... Anyways, all right. This is hard to actually just speak about them. I feel like I didn't even know how much I was capable of feeling. I didn't know how much I didn't know how deep my emotions could go until I read this book. Okay, and then we have Evie and Sam's dynamic, which is just absolutely delicious. And there's that whole scene where they're talking about how they met, and they're talking about and she says like something about, she's like, you had me so worried, I thought you were dead in a ditch. But now that you're fine, I wish you were just dead in a ditch. And then there's like all this like stomping on each other's feet, and they're like, oh, she just, she's not used to talking to a man at all. It's just so hard for her. And then Evie's like, well, he just always smells so terrible. He would never. It was just amazing. Their banter was fantastic, like so fantastic. Also, like Henry and Theta, this whole book, like Henry is like telling Ling about his friendship with Theta. And Theta, I just really love me some Theta and Henry relationship and the piano fund. And I could cry right now. Like I could literally cry right now just thinking about them. Also, Evie having this rivalry with Sarah Snow, who is like this stereotypical Christian person. But then at the end of the book, you can just see where it's going. You can see where the story is going. And I'm just so excited. It, like I said, it is physically pains me to not be already starting the next book. Also from the scene with Sam and Evie, there was a part where I wrote this down because it was so funny. He says like, oh, you looked like a grandma that night. Also, it's quite clear that Miss Libba Bray is being such a huge foreshadower here, because there's all this stuff about Project Buffalo, and there's all this stuff about page 144, or the psychic guy talking about 144. So you have like 144 is like I don't know what it is, but like Isaiah, I think was like number 144, or is the 144th experiment, and he seems to be like the strongest diviner power. So I have theories. I have so many theories, and if you've read the third book, don't let me know, but I will find out very soon. And I also have to give Libba Bray props for her, like just her writing, the way she writes like scenes, and like Jericho. There was also this whole dynamic with Jericho and Sam that was just delicious. And I know from what I heard, like there's going to be character interactions in like the third book that are just going to breathe life into me. I just know. I'm really hoping for like some Evie and Memphis interactions, or Evie and Isaiah, or Evie and anyone. And then like just, I want to see like Evie and Ling, and Memphis and Ling, and I just want to see them all interact. And I have a feeling that she's going to deliver me the best meal I've ever had. But this like scene when Jericho and Sam, they go into a basement and they see this like mural, and they're talking about how it was made by a bunch of slaves, I think, or something. That whole scene, just the writing is so good. It's so phenomenal. And of course, there's a lot of Henry and Ling in this book, and it was amazing. It was so good, but there's so many things discussed here. Like Libba Bray talks about the fact that, because this is like a horror novel, and there's like this underlying horror happening behind these dreams, and having to escape the dreams, or you have to become aware that what you're seeing isn't real in order to escape it. And then there's all this talk about like people wanting to just hide the fact. They just want to see what they want to see. They just want to see the nice things. They just want to see the pretty things, and they don't want to see the horror. But you have to look at it, and you have to see it, because it's so important. And that just ties in so well with the historical fiction part of the story, because she's talking about like the horror of our past, if you think about it, and like the frickin' like the parallels to today's world and 1920 are insane. In this book, we have a sleeping sickness where people are just going to sleep and they're not waking up. And part of that is like with the whole thing but like there's Chinese immigrants in the 1920s that there's a sleeping sickness, and they're being blamed for it. And there's like all this stuff about having to clean up after you. And we're literally living in a time in 2021 with almost the exact same situation in real life. But let's talk about the eugenics movement, and how I also have a theory about how it's going to play into the future book, because it's quite clear, / I think they might have already said it in the second book, I'm pretty sure that, I can't remember whose perspective it was, but we were in somebody's perspective, and they were like, well, okay, also at the very end of the book, you have the person who is supposed to be Sam's mom, who you get the impression that she tried to have a divine child on purpose. So either she's part of an experiment, or she found out about the diviners, or there's something going on with her in order to create Sam. Okay, also, so on the same theme here of the fact that you have to see the horror and embrace the horror, in the book at some point, like, Ling Chan finds out that no, she's gonna get sold into like slavery, and there's like a whole mess of an issue behind that, and then we find out that the girl actually inside of this dream isn't living in present day, and was actually, she actually killed the men who were trying to make her a slave in 1875, and we're currently in like the 1920s. So inside this dream, we have this girl like trying to, she's like, that's right, because the sleeping sickness was caused by her, because she was like getting batteries off of people's dreams. I'm just resisting the urge to cry forever. This is my favorite quote of the whole book, though. These ties to old bloodlines are just fear, and the same fear that keeps us praying to an absent God. If anything, I hope our research into the great unknown of diviners and the supernatural world proves that we are all one, joined by the same spark of energy that owes nothing to countries. There's also a scene with Ling and Henry, because those were some of my favorite scenes in the whole book also. Actually, the whole book is my favorite book. The whole entire book, everything in there, every single part of the story was amazing. Every single second of the book was fantastic. So there was a scene with Ling and Henry, and he's like singing a song to her because he's just this Southern charm gentleman who likes to sing, and he likes the company of other men. You know, he's a certain kind of gentleman. He like sings to her, and she's like, oh, I don't like that. And he says, well, I like it. And she's like, well, then why do you care what I think? Like, if you like things, just like them. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Okay, and then also in this book, there's a whole part with Sarah Snow, the religious, she's basically like a religious villain type of thing, but at the same time, she's this villain with like, I don't know if you would, she's kind of like her rival. I wouldn't say she's the villain. You know, the villain is the man in the stovepipe hat, which was said so many times in the book. Like, how many times can you tell me about the man in the stovepipe hat? Like, I get it, but I know why. And the amount of times you hear King of Crows, the amount of times King of Crows is stated in this book is also insane. And it's like, okay, but clearly the fourth book is called The King of Crows. So that makes it, you know, like, I really appreciate Sarah Snow, because she's clearly a character that, even though she's like, she's not just this archetype of a villain, like, she has depth to her, and she says, like, I guess people are going to have time for these divine powers, but they're not making time for the divine, aka Jesus, and all this stuff. And then she's like talking to one of the producers for Evie's radio show, and she says, oh, you don't know how the sleeping sickness is passed on. So Evie, who can read objects and see the past of what happens to the objects, she could touch that, and maybe she could just fall asleep, and you don't know. And it was like, I didn't even think about that. Shit, like, that's a consequence I didn't even think about. And it just adds stakes to the story. Okay, also, I kept writing out, like, what is 144? What's 144? There were so many times that the number 144 was referenced, and I was like, okay. So, like I already said, I have theories about that. But also, there was a moment with Blind Bill and Isaiah, and there's all this talk about, like, father-son relationships. And of course, you have Henry and his father-son relationship, and then you have like this whole thing, I'm skipping way ahead here, but there's this whole thing with Jericho and his creator, because Jericho had somebody create him or something. And there's like this whole talk about, there's just so much like father-son conversations in here, and like what that means, and like what you owe your father or what you don't owe your father. There's also so much talk about what it was like in this time period to be Black, which is so beautiful to see in a story. I feel like it would be, you know, such a disservice to just erase the history of what was happening at the time. And like you have this whole thought process with Memphis, and he's talking about like how when he goes to like these white neighborhoods, he's on his best behavior and he's doing everything he possibly can to like make sure that he's on his best behavior. But then like in the black neighborhoods, like white people will just walk up there and they don't have to think about anything, and they can just, you know, like they don't have any sort of like, oh, let me make sure that I'm like behaving right. And it's just, and that was such a tragic scene when Theta and Memphis were at like dinner together, and she like has this flashback because she, you know, has that power where she like set that man on fire. But also Memphis is a healer, so like setting up this healer with the person who sets people on fire, it's like literally she could be on fire and he could be healing her. It's so fucking good. It's such good storytelling. Also, I just don't understand Memphis' powers. Like his powers cut in and out all the time. Like one minute he has them, 1 minute he doesn't. I'm just making a note of it. I want to know what happens. Also, Babe Ruth is a name just constantly thrown out casually in the book. And I feel like I'm just also theorizing that Babe Ruth is going to have something to do with this story in some way, in a bigger way, because I don't know why she would just put Babe Ruth in there randomly for no reason. Also, the tension, the enemies to lovers with Sammy and Evie is so delicious, and there's so much like rivalry between them at first, but like the way that she writes like the characters like starting to slowly fall for each other and start to be like, well, maybe he's actually not that bad, and oh, it's so good. And then she like they try to break into a post office because they're trying to get more information. I think Sam was trying to find out more information about his mother, so because of that they go into this like post office type thing, and Sam is like, oh, we need a distraction. So Evie is like, well, let's go tell them that we're going to get eloped. And it's just amazing. Also, again, with the number 144, it's brought up so many times. And I think it was only brought up twice, like at like the halfway point, it's only brought up twice. And I know later on it's brought up again. And it's brought up in such a perfect way. Like the perfect way to bring it up. Again, the humor in this series is just it's so good to me. And she says something. Evie, she's just, you know, she's a self-aware girl, and Sam is like, oh, thanks for that, you're so subtle. And she was like, you want subtlety? Go to the nunnery. Like, oh, just, I loved it. I just loved that so much. And then there was this quote where I can't remember exactly how it happened, but there's just this quote about Memphis having like words taken, or there's some sort of flashback. I can't remember exactly. I just remember like this like part where it says like, but words do matter. And I just loved that. Okay, also, I can't really remember. I think Adeline is like this person who's introduced, and then they talk about her backstory and how she really wanted her lover back, and there was the consequence of her own family like dying in order for her to have the lover back, and that was ridiculous in the best way. And it's clear that I'm pretty sure the man in the stovepipe hat is going to be this like creepy, ominous thing that like grants you your wishes, but there's a consequence. And like, there's just so many things about storytelling in this story that I fucking love. Another quote that I loved, because there are so many. Here we go again. I'm going to read it to you. I just have to read it to you because if you've read it, I hope you're going to just sit here in this story with me. Perhaps time and space, and yes, even matter itself, are nothing more than constructs of the human mind. Again, Henry and Ling have another moment when Henry finally tells Ling that he himself is homosexual, and she has this whole thought about her own uncle and how she reacted to that and the ways that she had all these like biases to it based off of her family. And she was like, but I don't really like Henry, so I don't understand like why like anybody would have this negative opinion of someone like that, because oh god. Okay, and then he finally gets her to laugh, and it was just so good. Once again, this whole theme. See, there's just so many like linking themes, and she clearly like interweaves this story in a way where different characters are doing things that are relevant to what other characters are doing. For example, as I said before, the whole theme of like people not looking at the horrific things happening, there's this whole conversation with Evie and Sam, because Evie is like on her radio show, she'll like touch an object and then she will lie to people, and she will say to those people like, oh, he's like, this woman said that she wanted to know if her husband was cheating, and she holds the object and she can see the guy's cheating, but instead she's like, oh, he's just planning your birthday party. And then Evie's telling Sam that she's having these situations, and Sam is like, but you're just a liar then. You're not actually telling people the truth. And it just becomes this whole underlying theme of not looking at the horrific things happening. Also, I just wrote this down, so I don't remember exactly, but I do remember there was a perspective about the diviners and the war and how they wanted to like develop them to fight in the war, I think, or maybe it was just hinted at. And then also, I think this one was just hinted at, that somebody wiped Sam's memory, so like he can't remember who his mom was. Also, Evie has a dream and her brother is alive, and I will not be shocked at all when he shows up, because he we never see his body. Like, they never talk about his body. So obviously her brother's alive. I feel like that's going to be the least shocking thing, but I will still eat it up in the story because it will just be, again, good storytelling that I live for. I don't know why he's alive. I don't know how he's alive. So I'm intrigued to find out, but I do believe he's alive. But I'm very intrigued to find out how and why. And then we have like the whole scene with Jericho and his creator. I don't even know what to call it, because there was that whole story that we learned in the first book that explains like how Jericho is what he is and all that stuff, which was also phenomenal storytelling. Okay, another quote that I just enjoyed. Looking for truth makes a man have to look for himself along the way. Also, Evie and Theta's whole vibe is just so good. I will say, I think that Mabel is the weakest character. I feel like I know the least about her, but I have faith that in the next book, I'm going to come to love her, because in the first book, I really just liked Evie a lot, and I really liked Theta a lot. And I do feel like Mabel's a little bit stronger in the first book. So I did like her in the first book. I feel like she was definitely the least explored character in this book, but because it's a series, like, I'll forgive it. But I will say, like, in this specific book, I was in love with every other character except her. She didn't really do anything. I don't really know how much page time she had, so maybe that was a disservice to her, but there's more books in the series, like I said, so. Okay, also, there's like this whole scene where Ling and Theta and Evie, and I'm pretty sure that Mabel were all there. I think Mabel was there too. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, she's such a weak character, I couldn't even tell if she was present in the scene. But the moment when Ling goes to talk to her uncle, and the uncle is like talking about the collective unconscious and talking about the shadow self and how we all have a shadow self, but we can't see the shadow self. Babe, like, God. Right, okay, so then the next time that number 144 shows up was in that scene when she's with the uncle, and he finds like this book that talks about like stuff about the shadow self, I think, or something, and it's on page 144. It's on page 144, and we at this point have seen the number 144 so many times, and I just can't fucking wait to just learn how it's all gonna come to a head. You know, like, I just cannot wait. Also, I don't really remember who these characters were, but I'm pretty sure that this was about a black character who was hung up. Like, he was hung in the woods, and he was in the military, and they didn't even like bury him with his medals or anything, which is so tragic, but also historically accurate. So look at the horror, see it, acknowledge it, be aware that it's horrific and it's real and it really happened, because we have to acknowledge our past. Like, we just have to know about these things, because history is doomed to repeat itself, as you can also clearly see by the time that we are living in right now, because this was 100 years ago and the exact same shit is happening right now. Is Lib Bray a psychic? Again, there's like this whole moment with Henry and Ling, and how she goes, like, I can't remember what happens exactly, but I remember this. I just remember she wakes up, or Henry wakes up in the dream, and Ling was like stuck in the dream and couldn't get out of it. So he calls Ling's house so that she can wake up. And it's just like this absolutely beautiful friendship between them that is. Also, I was like, I guess I predicted this like very early on in the story, because I, for some reason, thought that whenever like Louis, who, you know, did Henry call him Henri? I'm pretty sure Henry called Louis Henri, or it might have been the other way around, but that's irrelevant. Like, something about the backstory with Henry and Louis made me think from just that Louis died. But also, like, when we find out that Ling can see, like, when she goes in the dreamland, she can see dead people, I instantly was like, oh, Louis dead. Like, it was an instant connection. So I guess I wasn't supposed to realize that, because I was kind of confused by like the train coming to New York, because I was like, but he's in the dream, so it was confusing. But nonetheless, even though I saw that coming, that was probably the part that made me cry the absolute most, was when Henry got to go see Louis and they talked. Oh, God. There's a whole scene when Henry goes to see Louis in the dream state or whatever the fuck, or somehow he's like able to see Louis. He's at Louis's house, and I think that's when he's not waking up, because the girl with the white dress and the blood on her, whatever, like because she stabs Henry, so I thought he like actually died. But then, can you die in a dream? This book was so confusing, and it was amazing. It was so... But she like stabs him in the dream, so then he's like in the dream, but he's with Louis, and then Louis is like trying to get him to realize that it's not real, and trying to get him to realize that he needs to wake up. And he's like, there's a quote also from that scene where he says something like, it wouldn't be a good dream without you in it, or something so romantic. Also, another theory that I have, because I remember, I think that, oh, right, I guess we did find out in this book that her brother's not dead, because somebody brings her an object, and in that object she learns that her brother's not dead, but then her brother's trying to kill her. I think in like the actual real part we're at, like her brother's trying to kill her. So I had a theory that whoever gave her that object that made her realize the shit about her brother, he's like behind some sort of government thing to make the diviners look evil, because when people have powers in so many stories, they are made to look evil. And normally this would just be like an allegory for racism, but there's actual real racism in the books, and that's a part of it. Okay, and then I continued on that theory by saying that I bet Sarah Snow is somehow connected to the person who gave Evie the like thing that made her realize her brother's not dead, or something about her brother, and then so maybe James, Evie's brother, is somehow connected to Sarah Snow. Also just a theory. Again, I just have to praise the writing and the way that Libba Bray describes this message that Sarah Snow, she's sending out this message about like how the diviners are evil, but just the way that Libba Bray writes it and says like, I can't even do it justice, but like the way that it's being delivered, and it's like seeping into all these parts of America, and it was just fan-fucking-tastic. Like, it was so good. Also, Evie having this such dramatic moment when she's talking to Sam, and she's talking about all these nightmares that she had from Naughty John the first time, and she's talking about how she can't get it out of her head, and that when she can't get it out of her head, she asks the djinn to do it, and the way that it was spoken in the book was so perfect. It was amazing. Okay, and also there was this whole entire part where like Yemin and Ling are like talking, and like Yemin is like showing them like you can just create whatever you want in the dream, and then you can just make it happen, and it'll just show up for you, and you can see it. And like Ling just thinks it's so cool and amazing, and she loves it. But then you find out like that the whole thing about how the dreams are actually powered like by the sleeping curse type thing. So like people that are asleep are actually what's giving you the ability to create everything that you see. So while it's beautiful and amazing, there's something horrific underneath the surface. Also, that part where they find a skull and Evie touches it and sees the memories and where the guy died, and there's like this whole thing I haven't even talked about in the whole book where like there's these workers and they're like stuck behind like a subway station that gets like closed up somehow. I honestly, it went over my head every time it was talked about, but it was just so eerie. It was so creepy. And she goes to like see this and she's like, oh my God, I hate having this power and like being able to see whatever the fuck. So that's right. She sees the skull of Ye Min, and then Ye Min was in the subway when it got closed up because she was killing O'Banion and Lee, who were the people that sold her into slavery. She was killing them, which like, you know, like they're trying to sell you into sex slavery, girl. Like, you murder those men, girl. Bye. Also, like, Beach Pneumatic Transit Company, I'm not sure we got a full understanding of what that is. So it's clearly a company that makes, I wonder if it'll be connected to the government conspiracy part somehow. Once again, we have this amazing like line here that has to do with the same theme of looking at the horrific things that are happening, where Henry says, just because someone wanted to hide the truth doesn't mean the truth didn't exist. So even if you were to just completely erase history and completely act like it never existed, it would still exist. Whether you acknowledge it or not, it exists. Okay, yeah, and this is probably the part that had me sobbing the most, was when Henry went to go see Louis and he was in his dream and he was like, okay, but what you're realizing, like what's happening here isn't real. And Louis says to Henry, you still have all those songs to write. Also, didn't even talk about the fact that Henry and Theta had a piano fund and they were going to use it together to become famous, but he took the money out and he used it to get Louis a train to come be in New York with them, but he couldn't be in New York with them because he was dead. So then Henry just wasted the money. Also, I really appreciated this whole topic of like second and third generation Americans having these, the way she wrote it was just so good, talking about how it said, like, it's not an exact quote, but it says, go, they whisper, but don't forget us. The ghost saying they wish they could warn people about history and all these other things. And then the very end of the book, we find out about Sam's mom and that she wants him to find her, which is like the biggest cliffhanger. Okay, that's it. That's the whole review. So that's everything that I loved. I loved everything. I loved every single second of the entire book. I started this at 11:30 and it is now 12:30, but somewhere, somehow, I need it documented. This is currently my favorite series of all time. I need book 3 right now, okay? I need it right now. I already have it. I don't know when I'm going to edit this because it's an hour long. So it's really, whatever. Please let me know your favorite series of all time. Is it The Diviners? Because if it is, then hi, hey best friend, how are you? Let's start a piano fund. Let's move to New York. Because good God, this book was fantastic. But I'm going to have my Instagram, Goodreads, all that stuff, Twitter, it's all going to be linked in the description down below. So follow me, hit me up. Love to hear from you. Have a great day. Have a great night. All that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Bye.